ontheringer.com. Check out the Portland Food Diary by our very own hungry homie, Danny Chow. He is our roving, eating man on the ground. He has outstanding food and drink suggestions. Always keep an eye on his Instagram at Danny King Chow. Right now on the Ringer Podcast Network, the Podfather Bill Simmons has Jason Hare on to talk about the Andre the Giant documentary that premieres this week and has been getting nothing but rave reviews. You also can check out Recapables this week for this week's episode of Billions. That's Bill Simmons and Mallory Rubin talking about this week's episode of Billions. And don't you forget, it's time to start repping The Ringer with hoodies, tees, and hats. TheRinger.com/shop has lots of offerings. Now, you have to get in there quickly because there's a limited supply. But some fresh hoodies, some fresh tees, some fresh hats. I modeled one at Augusta National last week. Check them all out. My hungry homies, my taste buds, my culinary comrades, here we are. Another edition of House of Carbs, food podcast for the hungry people, by the hungry people. I am your hungry host, Joe House. This is a special crossover edition. We are mishing and mashing with the Ringer NBA show. There is only one man in the Ringer universe qualified to have an opinion about all 16 of the NBA teams and cities that are in this year's 2018 NBA playoffs. That is the Podfather himself, Bill Simmons. He is coming on. We are ranking from 16 to 1 the very best food experiences among all of the playoff teams in this year's NBA playoffs. Let's get in that belly with the Podfather, Bill Simmons. All right, my taste buds, my hungry homies, my culinary comrades, I'm humbled, I'm honored, and always a little bit hungry. Another week with the Podfather himself. Bill Simmons is on House of Carbs today. And the reason that Bill is joining is because we are, to me, in the midst of the best sports month on the calendar.
Oh, yeah.
I know there's an argument between April and October, right, BS?
I'm prone to April. I don't think there's anything better than that first round when you have the Masters, WrestleMania, Final Four. And then it goes right into baseball starting. Everybody's still feeling good about their baseball team. And then it creeps right into the NBA, NHL playoff combo. There's like an 8-day stretch there in round one when there's just sports on constantly every single day. And my wife hates me, and it's the best. I
agree. It is the best. I'm also partial to April because it's a glorious time of year.
Yes.
It portends that we have like 6 or 7 months of good weather and shorts and comfortable clothes. And honestly, as it relates to the House of Carbs, some great eating in front of us.
You bet. That's a key point, House, because it's been so long since I lived on the East Coast. April, for 3 straight decades represented hope. And
hope.
Just waiting out of this 6-month terrible winter, or 5 months, however long it would be, where all of a sudden now the sun was shining. We used to have halter top day was a big day.
Big day in New York City.
Yeah. And just like all of a sudden people were just so excited it was going to get warm again. And there was a real energy, and the sports and the playoffs always tied into that. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about food. This is going to be a really interesting discussion. We are ranking. I'm
glad you think so.
We're ranking the NBA playoff cities in terms of who we hope makes the finals, because that's where we would want to have the best meal.
Yeah. So you will be at the NBA finals this year, no matter which two cities end up. Yeah, you're going to every one. And we're going to look at this. We're going to consider the possibilities through the prism of which 2 cities would be the best for our bellies.
Yes. And also, like, the finals matchup gets settled and I text you and I say, oh, blank's in there. Oh, we got to go. And there's just a tangible excitement that's completely food related. It has nothing to do with basketball. So when I told you I want to do this, I told you I was going to give you a top 6. I went a little further.
Good.
We're going from 16 to 1 because I think we should shit on some cities too.
That's so rude.
Yeah.
So rude.
Yeah, let's do some shitting. 16th, coming in at number 16. No offense, by the way, no offense to any of these cities. It's not the fault of the people who live there. Not every city gets to have a David Chang just pop up and, start a culinary revolution. Not every city has a history of barbecue or Chinese food or whatever's going on. Some cities are just kind of in America and getting by, and it's not their fault. With that said, my number 16 city, Cleveland, Ohio.
Wow. Yeah, as I looked at this list, let me hear your explanation for why Cleveland comes in at 16 for you.
My explanation is we went there for the collectors convention years ago with our friend Hershey, and when we tried to figure out where to eat, we settled on a Morton's, which I can get in any city. There wasn't any, so I'm sure there's a couple, you should have known about this place or that place, but Cleveland is like that. OKC I have at number 15.
Yeah.
And it's basically Cleveland, but with a little more of a Southwestern, there's a meat scene going. I was stuck in OKC a couple times. Let's just say this. KD opened a restaurant called KD's, which I think was ranked 4th at one point and the best restaurants in OKC. Anytime a restaurant named after an athlete is in your top 5, probably not a great food scene. So for me, it's 16 and 15. You agree with that?
That's a good rule of thumb. If one of the top 5 restaurants in your city has been opened by a sports figure, not a great food look for your city. I agree with both of those selections. I also want to add the observation. We're going to get a lot of input from people that claim, oh, you guys are idiots. You're whitewashing this whole thing. You're using too broad a brush in considering this. And so we just sort of, I'm going to admit it up front. We are making gross generalizations here about the food scenes in many of these cities. We haven't been to every one of these cities, although we've been to quite a few as I was looking at the list. Yeah, been to most of them. So we have a perspective. We're not authorities on the food in these cities, but, I can't argue with either one of Cleveland or OKC in the bottom quadrant there because they're both just meat cities.
OKC,
in our experience.
When I was there in 2010, the quote unquote best restaurant to go to after the game was called Mickey Mantle's. Yet another sports figure. So I just want to point that out. Also, if anyone's offended by this or upset, you just need to reevaluate things. House and I have known each other for 30 plus years. This is the kind of shit we talk about. We decided to do a podcast. There's going to be gross generalizations. We're going to be unfair. We didn't do a lot of research for it. And if you're offended, I'm sorry. This is just my gut reactions listing all the cities. We did not do like a 2.5 hour deep dive into, has anything changed in the OKC food scene in the last 2 years? I don't care. These are just my opinions. If you don't want to listen, turn us off.
Oh, it's not just that part, but this is your belly. Like you are going to have to physically go and eat. So what are you excited about? This is the ranking.
This is my belly and your belly and the telepathic connection those two bellies have had over the years.
They've had
combining
some
to try to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah, we connected in Augusta, Georgia last week.
Yeah, and guess what? We ate stuff there and it was delicious.
Good stuff. We had some good stuff.
All right, number 14, a city very near and dear to my heart. I spent a great Super Bowl week there once. I think you were there too, Indiana.
I liked Indiana. We had a good time at St. Elmo's.
Yeah, and listen, St. Elmo's is a fine restaurant. The shrimp cocktail sauce was great. It put hair on my chest. Lord knows I needed more hair on my chest. But I'm always skeptical of cities that when you go, people only mention one restaurant. If you went to basically any city, if you went to San Francisco, nobody would be like, hey, you got to eat at Jackie's. Like San Francisco's 100 restaurants. But you go to Indiana and do you go to St. Elmo's? And St. Elmo's is good. It's fun. It's a giant steakhouse. The Bloody Marys are great. I like the shrimp cocktail. Had a good steak. It wasn't like life altering or anything.
I mean, to be honest, the best meal that we had together when we went to Indianapolis for the Super Bowl was when we went and visited the bar,
the
owned and
Conrad.
operated by the Conrad was fine. That was just drinks and charcuterie. But I'm talking about we went to Jason Whitlock's family. His parents
that was
owned and
great.
operated a bar, and we got like home cooked, home style food that they serve at the bar. We were eating ribs, and I couldn't stop. I mean, you had to roll me out of there.
So I did think of that, and I think that should be mentioned. By the way, none of these cities are losers. The next 14 cities we're going to name, they're not losers. This is just a meritocracy and a ranking. OKC and Cleveland, sorry, you guys actually are losers from a food scene. And I don't know what else to tell you. You drew the short end of the straw. The good news is OKC got to watch 3 MVPs and Cleveland's got to watch LeBron. That's great. They won the title. Like food is not, sometimes it's not your thing. Indiana, that was a great experience. I think there's a whole soul food scene there that is kind of underrated. There's
worth mentioning.
Yeah. And unfortunately, when I was there, I'd spent a lot of time at the Aubon Pan, which I don't think is a great sign. Number 13, another city I've been to a bunch of times, Milwaukee, which is basically in that OKC Cleveland range, except there's like a whole sausage bratwurst, like old school kind of things you're not supposed to eat anymore. Sauerkraut, cheese curds.
Yeah.
All stuff that is just incredibly and unfathomably unhealthy. And yet I've had a good time eating there. The food's good. I don't know if there's the high-end restaurant scene maybe that we're looking for, but if you're just looking to gain 7 pounds in 4 days, like I recommend Milwaukee. I think it's great.
I've never set foot in Milwaukee, so I'm looking forward to that experience. I want to do that one time.
I went to Lambeau, and it was the only time I've ever seen triple XL and quadruple XL football jerseys for sale. So we'll leave it at that. Number 12, a city that I have spent way too much time in and hope to never go to again. No offense there, but I just feel like, I don't know, I'm going to be dead by the time I'm 80, 85. Like I only have so many months left. And I feel like I did my tour of duty here. San Antonio.
So go ahead. I'm interested in your take on it.
Good Mexican.
Yeah.
I think the thing with Mexican is Mexican has a ceiling, right? Mexican is an innings eater and it can be really good. But the concept of great, like unfathomably awesome Mexican, I've had very good Mexican a huge bunch of times in my life. You rarely have like the overwhelming Mexican food experience. It's just very good. It's solid. It serves purpose. You get to dip stuff and put different sauces on things. I spent a lot of time there. There was actually a fish place that I really liked that I found. The Riverwalk, throw that out. I mean, the Riverwalk is a tourist trap. The water's green. If you touch the water, your finger just disintegrates. Incredibly overrated. But there is a very good Mexican scene, and I think it should be commended.
That's where San Antonio deserves the place that it has on this ranking, where you're putting it, because it's basically just a one-note food town in my experience as well.
Yes,
the taquerias, you can get very very authentic in San Antonio, and that commends it. So. But it's not a top 10 food.
Yeah, and again, there are no losers anymore. Everybody wins with the rest of this list. The only people that lost were the first 2 cities we mentioned. I have Utah at number 11. So I have only eaten there once, and it was a great meal. But the thing that stuck with me was Steve Kerr said once that somewhere in Utah, whether it's Salt Lake or something, has the best restaurant he's ever been to. And that stuck in the back of my head. I think atmosphere matters. I like the high altitude. You get a little groggy. You get a couple drinks, couple food. It's just like a fun experience. The setting's great. And it's just a little more exciting to eat there. I might be wrong with all of that, but that was my case.
Yeah, I've never been to Salt Lake City, so I've never eaten I passed through it. I flew into it and then got into a car and drove. I've never actually set foot in the city. I've flown into the airport. And I've eaten in Park City, Utah, and the food there is, ski bum, ski town, delicious.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about the food scene in Salt Lake City. Let's just ask the hungry homies to hit us with suggestions. I mean, let's belly source a little bit from Salt Lake. I'm interested in what the food scene's all about in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, to me, this is word of mouth. We've done no research whatsoever, and this is just my belly talking. I feel like I've heard enough times over the years that the food in Utah is kind of a thing that my belly drifted toward them for the 11th spot. Number 10, I cheated. You're not going to be happy. I hit up David Chang for advice on some of these cities because I hadn't been to a couple.
That's fine.
And he's very bullish on Minneapolis.
Oh, interesting.
Which I did not expect.
And let me guess something about that.
I have no details. He just told me where they should be on the list. I didn't follow his list completely, but the fact that he was bullish on Minneapolis raised some eyebrows on this end. I only have 2 eyebrows, but both of them were raised.
Well, I'll tell you, I got a lot of input from folks in Minnesota who thought that we might be getting together at the Super Bowl, that we might physically attend. And so people started hitting us on the Instagram at the House of Carbs and on the Twitter as well with suggestions of places to go. It fell in kind of 2 categories, it seemed like a lot of gastropub kind of focused stuff, maybe innovations in terms of that kind of idea. And they're going to do beer correctly in Minneapolis. The other thing that I'm interested in that I would want to explore if we had the time is there's Ethiopian food in Minneapolis. Because of a big concentration of Ethiopian folks. I think Washington, D.C. and Minneapolis have the greatest concentration, I might be wrong about that, of Ethiopians. But I know they have a big congregation there, and I'm interested in that food scene.
That's the biggest hole in my food resume right now in terms of food that I actually like that I don't know enough about is Ethiopian.
Oh, we're going to fill that. DC is insane. We got to get you out here.
DC does. LA has Little Ethiopia, and it's literally a block. They're not kidding when they call it Little Ethiopia, but
it's literally little.
But I like there's some creativity with the Ethiopian food that I didn't realize that was as big of a Minnesota scene. I also think they have there's a lot of a lot of meat, right? There's a good weird hunting scene in
Ethiopian
Minnesota.
Cuisine for sure.
No, I'm saying in Minnesota.
Oh, yeah.
There's
no shortage.
Yeah, they go out and kill like a bison.
If you're into game, I think you can do game there. Yes, I believe that's true.
Well, I'm into game because I'm a fucking man and I like to eat meat. Sorry. Number 9, I didn't want to be a homer. It would personally rank higher for me because I lived there forever. My dad lives there now. I know all the restaurants. I know all the places to go. So if my personal rankings, if I was just being a complete homer, it would be top 5. But I think to be fair, for the accuracy of this list, Boston has to be 9th.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm kind of interested now. I'm looking at the list and I'm trying to come up with what cities Boston would jump ahead of.
Listen,
and in that top 8.
My belly chose this list. My belly spent more time in Boston than every other city I've been in combined. And I'm just listening to my belly here. I have Boston 9. If the Celtics are in the finals, obviously that's incredible for a million different reasons. And the food would be great and I would love it, but it would feel familiar. It wouldn't be like, oh.
Give me a reason. Give me a reason to ever leave North End. Why would I leave North End if I'm going to go eat in Boston?
I'm trying to think.
What am I missing? What restaurant am I going to miss if I just stick to if I go eat every single night in the North End?
So, Boston, like any other place, has pockets. That DC's like that. I think every good major city has pockets of different food. At the North End is one of the most satisfying pockets I've ever seen in any city, where it's just a finite amount of space and blocks. You know exactly how big it is. You know where all the places are. There's some variety. There's an Oyster House place that's like the number 1 place there. That's a 3-hour line. My cousin Kristen works there sometimes. Shout out to her. But that's probably the number 1 place. But they have a bunch of stuff down there. And back to your point, you go down there at 5:00 and you just figure it out, and it's gonna go well because you're in the North End. It's just gonna go well.
You could just have 6 Italian meals and cover all of the regions of Italy, all the regional cuisines of Italy. You can do high-end pizza. You can do low-end pizza. You can do meat focus. You can do pasta focus. And I'm just talking about Italy. This is why I always enjoy losing myself in the North End when I visit Boston.
And you left out the bakeries, like the old school. We don't give a fuck about what the stories are coming out about baked goods and flour. Like, you're gonna eat this the way we made it in 1930. Here it is.
Yeah,
great.
There's a lot of gluten. They're not afraid of gluten.
If you ask for like a gluten-free anything in the North End, they would just beat the living shit out of you and leave you for dead in the alley. That's what happens. I've seen it. I know for a fact. Number 8, I really struggled. Once we get to the top 8, this became very hard, and I got to be honest, it became very serious, and I developed my own playoff intensity, really putting a lot of thought into how this would go and what I wanted and what my belly wanted and the reactions you would have on the phone as we planned our thing. Number 8 for me is Philly.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't make the decision lightly. Lord knows the Philly fans are fucking sensitive. So I don't know what to tell you. I hope they don't get mad at me, but
we did bet on them.
Well, we did bet on them. And I think there's a real possibility they make the finals. And we're going to have to take this. This could be a real conversation that we're having 6 weeks from now. I think the cheesesteak thing, your head goes there right away and just like, oh, cheesesteaks, that'll be great. But after 2 days, you're ready for other stuff. The Philly scene better than I do. What kind of options are we going to have if I'm there for a week? How good am I looking?
So you're looking extraordinarily good. The Ringer's own Chris Ryan, native son of Philadelphia.
I remember. Yeah.
He and I got together for a Philly food takeover in December.
Yeah.
And it was a real revelation to me how diverse the food scene is in Philly. I, like you, had sort of organized in my head. And I've done eating in Philly because DC and Philly are close to each other. You can get some great Asian food. You can just get some great Italian food. There's a strong Italian tradition in Philly, duh. And, the cheesesteak thing and then the roast pork, kind of the whole sandwich game, that is going to be on point. Chris Ryan and I went and ate a variety of Mediterranean and really Israeli-focused food that was just unbelievable. And if you wanted to sort of go light for the week, if you are not in a frame of mind where you wanted to do a cheesesteak, every single night and wake up heavy every morning, you can go have a terrific falafel. You can go have hummus 4 different ways. You can go, the best restaurant in Philly by reputation and accolade is this restaurant by a chef named Michael Solomonoff. He and his partner Stephen Cook have this restaurant Zahav, which is an Israeli restaurant, and it is kind of served in that Mediterranean style of a whole number of small dishes, that Spanish tapas idea, but with the flavors of Israel. We had mostly vegetable focused, but of course he brought this beautiful lamb, this lamb shoulder that was like melting in the mouth, delicious. The other thing that was shocking was duck hearts. The unbelievable duck hearts that melt in your mouth. It just tastes like duck. But the diversity of cuisine in Philly at this moment cannot be underestimated. And I think you would have a terrific eating week there. The problem is we bet on them, so they're not going to be in the finals this year.
I do feel like, don't you feel like the cheesesteak in Philly is a little like the clam chowder in Boston? Like the clam chowder in Boston has this reputation that it so far exceeds the actual quality of the clam chowder. First of all, you can get clam chowder basically anywhere that has clams. It's not like the Boston clam chowder is better than anyone else's clam chowder. I think it's kind of a thing, but it certainly isn't like when I go back to Boston, I'm like, man, I can't wait to go balls deep in a clam chowder. Like it's just not that good. It's fine. Well, I think about like, I can't wait to go to the Red Hat and have boneless buffalo chicken wings. And they're going to be incredible.
I'm going to take issue with comparing the clam chowder to the cheesesteaks, because the cheesesteaks in Philly really are genuinely and uniquely unbelievable, and you really do have to eat them in Philly or the Philly surrounds. You can't get a Philly cheesesteak, a proper.
So it's
Philly
not
cheesesteak.
reputation. It's
No.
actually delivers on the goods. Because I remember having them once. Maybe I had a bad experience, but the first time I had one in Philly at one of my book tours, I just basically expected to pass out from joy, and it was really good. It wasn't overwhelming, and I don't know how far you can take the cheesesteak, but guess what? I'd love to find out if Philly made the finals. I want to know how far I can take the cheesesteak.
Well, I think you could do it just once and then go do, a Philly food tour that covers a whole lot of unexpected varieties, unbelievable Vietnamese and Thai places. The guys behind Federal Donuts, which is a donut and fried chicken place.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things.
Healthy.
Our boy Tom Henneman pointed out this joint called Stock, which is just unbelievable. He sent us a picture afterwards of like that Vietnamese pho style, that soup, with the beautiful vegetables and beef broth and that kind of thing. So that's basically the vibe.
The important thing to note is that the 11th best cheesesteak place in Philly is better than anything I could have in Cleveland.
That's true.
Yeah, so I just want to mention that one more time. Number 7, I almost had Philly ahead of this city, and then I flipped it because I put Washington, D.C. 7th because for me in my belly, I have the ultimate tour guide in One Joe House because you've eaten at all the relevant places. And I know like if Washington's in the finals, which I think the only way that could happen is if the other 7 teams in the East came down with some sort of virus that just knocked everybody out. And it was just like the only team that was still healthy was Washington. I don't see any other way that they can make it considering the John Wall versus the teammates thing is the secret storyline that's going on in the NBA right now, and you know it, and you don't want to talk about it. Washington's not going to make the finals, but if they did, I would love to go to Momofuku one day. I would love to go to that place we went with Uncle Tony that time. You would take me to that Italian place that you love and that one steak place you love, and I would basically get the greatest hits house tour, and I'd be very happy.
Yeah, so obviously I have a few issues with what you just said. I thought it was rude that you would suggest that the Wiz can't make the finals unless all of the East comes down with a virus.
It's true.
Will also observe that the Wiz have in the past had this sort of galvanizing moment as the playoffs arrive. All of the sort of drama of the regular season seems to fall away. In the Wall-Beal era, they are undefeated in the first round of the playoffs, which I think for you and your Boston Celtics should be concerning because there's a distinct possibility the Wizards and the Celtics play in the first round. But, this Wizards team, I've been saying it all for many months now, they don't fear anybody in the East. There isn't anybody in the East they look at and say we can't beat. Now, LeBron did turn it on a little bit here in the last 8 weeks or so. And if LeBron's playing like that, then nobody's going to beat Cleveland, including Philadelphia. But your point,
nobody wants to hear your pathetic justifications of this terrible Wizards season.
Us having a wonderful eating experience in D.C. is well taken.
Plus, I get Uncle Tony. Yeah. The last time I was there, we basically Uncle Tony cheated on his entire family with us. He rented a hotel room. It was like Ride Home was saying it was like he had an affair, like he was Don Draper in the 50s. Only affair was with me and you, taking him out to restaurants. It was the best.
That he hadn't heard of and that he wouldn't go to in the ordinary course. And that's the thing that I like in particular with Uncle Tony is being the tour guide on a new adventure.
Yeah, that made them number 7. Uncle Tony, one of my 5 favorite human beings.
Yo, Ringer NBA pals, taking a quick break to talk about our friends at Google Assistant. With the Google Assistant, you can complete over 1 million actions on your phone, in your car, around the house. One of my favorites is to play podcasts when I'm in the car, and I can't be messed around with my phone. I don't touch my phone when I'm in the car. I just say, hey, Google, play the latest JJ Redick podcast. You know why I say that? I say that because I want JJ Redick to come on my podcast. My friends, download the Google Assistant today. Ringer NBA Pal support for today's show comes from Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is your hub for teamwork in Office 365. With so much to look after, would it not be great if there was just one place to look? Teams is that single workspace where you can work, share, and connect with the people in your work life. Teams brings together your chats, your meetings, files, and apps all in one place. It allows teams to create, collaborate, and communicate authentically. Take teamwork where you work with apps for mobile and desktop. So whether you're sprinting towards a deadline or sharing the next big idea, Teams can help you and your own team achieve even more. Microsoft Teams and Office 365. Visit office.com/teams to learn more.
All right, now we're getting to the top 6. And this is where it gets serious. This is where it gets really good, and I really started agonizing over my list. Number 6, Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
A dark horse to actually make the finals if Curry doesn't come back and Chris Paul and James Harden just combine to take all of their past playoff choke jobs and just combine them into one giant Heimlich. There's a road. I don't think it'll happen, but there's a roadmap for Portland to sneak in. Portland has a really kind of eclectic scene. Like there's a lot of microbrews and weird restaurants, and it's a cool city. I like it there. I like the different kind of options. One of the fun things about it is it's not a place where you have to go and have this hugely expensive dinner to have an awesome time. You can go to a really nice state-of-the-art, micro pub / whatever, and have a great time and try some beers and have a good cheeseburger. And it's just one of those places. I'm a huge fan. I think there's just a lot of ways to go. Incredible coffee scene. I know we didn't really mention coffee as much, but I just like it. What do you think?
That adds to it. So I like that you use the word eclectic because I think that's the perfect word for Portland. And shout out to Portland and its food scene. They have been at the forefront of a number of different movements. You mentioned coffee. They were sort of first
Super
movers
early
on the sort of the elegant coffee vibe. Not expensive, but elegant, like taking the time to pay attention.
Yeah, and if I could interrupt you for a second. Also
Please.
The first in moody internet writers sitting in a coffee shop for long periods of time having a $7 coffee. I think Portland pioneered that, and then Brooklyn took it and grabbed it.
I don't think Portland was charging $7 though. I think Portland was charging $3 for that cup of coffee.
Maybe $3 for the cigarettes too.
I also just want to give Portland a pat on the back. Really at the forefront of the food truck scene, like as far back as the early 2000s to mid 2000s. They were really first on the like farm to table. This way of describing super fresh, local, regional ingredients and getting those ingredients into their meals. And I like this thing that's going on. I'm having Danny Chow on, who has been to a couple of these cities that we're going to talk about, and including Portland. They're doing this thing right now where restaurateurs are creating menus related to drinking food. And we're talking about ethnicity. So like there's a place that's serving Russian drinking food. And I had a chef on the House of Carbs about a month ago, Andy Ricker of Pok Pok, which is a northern region Thai cuisine. He has a cookbook on Thai drinking food, like the food that you eat while you're drinking. So, and more shout outs to Portland. That's all.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one of the reasons I love the Portland food scene. We went there once, and I think we've told this story in House of Carbs with our friend Hershey and a bunch of other people. We went to what's that crab place? What was it called?
No, it was like a Louisiana focus.
And you started out the dinner, you had a Bloody Mary for some reason, even though it was like 10 o'clock at night. And then like a vodka
like a great
something.
Drink. It was flavorful.
And you had like the etouffee and you had all these different things that just don't belong together in the same stomach. And then you had crab and then you had a steak. And it was honestly like watching what would happen if my dog Willie if we just left the fridge open and he could pull anything out he want and just gorged himself to death, is what you were doing at this restaurant. And at one point you didn't feel that well and you went up and you disappeared and we didn't know where you went. And 10 minutes passed and 15 minutes passed. And I went to find you and you were sitting in a phone booth that didn't have a phone in it. And the door was closed and you were just sitting in this phone booth doing, I don't know what, like trying not to die, I guess. And that's when we brought you back. We brought you back to the table and you left. And that was the night that you told us the next day that you went back to your hotel room, took off all your clothes and laid out on the bathroom floor, which I think is how Elvis died.
Well, I'm glad that I didn't die. The cold tile is very soothing. I highly recommend it.
Okay.
And I just had this experience of a real surge in spices. The combination of what was going on with the etouffee and the Bloody Mary nearly took my lid off. And it wasn't like spicy hot, like, oh my God, this is numbing my tongue. It was a spice that took my body temperature from 98.6, and I think it hit 104 or 105 in about the first 20 minutes there. So I just needed a breath of fresh air. And God bless them. They had a booth. I could go sit in the booth. I got up, walked around, splashed some water in my face, and then just sat in the booth. I could sit upright, and I was glad there was no phone there. Nobody interrupted me. But it was nice of you to come find me.
And also, people thought you were crazy. Nephew Kyle, what was crazier? House sitting in a phone booth by himself for 20 minutes that had no phone in it in a public restaurant with people walking by him, or House willingly telling us the next morning that he lay on his hotel bathroom floor completely naked because the cooling bathroom tiles helped cool his body down? If you had to pick.
Easily option A. I understand option B.
Nephew Kyle. He's our House of Carbs producer. So anyway, shout out to Portland. That's a great city. Before we get to the top five, I want to pour out a little something for the city of Seattle, which should have a basketball team, which got molested by David Stern and Clay Bennett and a whole bunch of people. And they stole their team 10 years ago, actually, this summer. I seem to be the only person outside of Seattle who even remembers this or cares, but it's a fucking joke. And we could have had Seattle in the NBA Finals with this OKC team at least once. And in general, Seattle should just be an option for the finals every year. I love Seattle. It's such a fun place to go. Such a fun place to eat. They had that crazy market that's all-time great. Unbelievable seafood scene, great restaurants, and it's shame on you, NBA. Shame on you. Shame on you, Adam Silver. Shame on you. I love you, Adam Silver, but shame on you. You should have fixed this by now.
Well, he's only been at it for a year.
No, he's been at it for 5 years. He should have fixed this by now. Either get an expansion team or move one of your franchises that aren't working in Seattle. These people should have a team. And he should be ashamed. He should.
I just want to go eat there again.
Yeah,
it's
me
such
too.
a great eating town. The sushi in Seattle, I'm dying for it.
Well, I'll tell you this: the trade-off from a food standpoint from Seattle to OKC was half as bad as the James Harden trade. So anyway, let's get to the top five. Number 5, Miami. I've been fortunate enough. I've led a very blessed life. For 2 years, we did the NBA. Me and Jalen Rose, we did the NBA show. And Miami was in it for 3 out of the 4 series we did. And we went to Prime 112 a bunch of times. I got to watch Jalen eat lobster over and over again. That restaurant alone and the restaurant right across the street, which is their pasta place, those two alone, then you get Joe's Crab Shack, but then you have this whole Miami food scene, and they really have a little bit of everything. But more importantly, we talk about these little pockets. Now you're talking about the Cuban pocket.
Yeah, it's true.
And that's before we get to fish. We get to like the fancy restaurants. We get to the glitzy ones, the expensive dinners. But then you have this whole Cuban side. And I am 100% all the way in on the Cuban scene for food. I love it.
You and me both. I wanted to quibble with Miami. I wanted to rank Miami lower than the top 5. But as I was refreshing my recollection about what that food scene is like, you can have so many great meals from so many different, and this is common of all of the cities in this top 5. The eclecticism and the quality, like the very clean seafood, right? Like very fresh, bright seafood taste.
The greatest.
You can have very authentic Cuban street food. I've had some of the best Italian food I've ever had in my whole life in Miami.
Great coffee. And I'll tell you this, I wouldn't want to live in Miami, but if I could spend a week with perfect weather in any city in America, I would pick Miami. I think there's the most stuff to do. When you go out at night, it's just a scene. It's like electric. The food's great. Everything
Most
about
things
it
to
is
see.
cool and different. It almost feels like you're not in America in some ways. It feels like you're away.
Feels European.
Yeah,
me.
and I think there's some other cities like this too, where like you go to Montreal. I haven't been to Toronto, but apparently it's like this, where you don't even feel like you're in Canada. You feel like you're in Europe. Miami, you don't feel like you're in America. You feel like you're in this city that has transcended America and become something else. But just an awesome place, and I think the food's really good there too. And it would be nice if they snuck into the finals. Put it that way. Number 4, Toronto, a city I've never been to. David Chang, I am deferring to him on this because he sent me his list. He said this was the number 1 choice in the East. Most options, most ways to go. I don't really have anything to add. I don't know if you know anything.
Well, Juliet Littman and I, for whatever reason, Toronto keeps showing up in our food news. And so we were telling these stories, and then we say to each other, we have to go to Toronto and see a basketball game and then go do some eating.
Yeah.
Now, funny you mentioned Chang. Chang included a restaurant called the Fishman Clubhouse on his last meal on Earth. His last meal on Earth had him going from Franklin Barbecue down in the Austin, Texas area, directly on a direct flight up to Toronto, so he could go conquer the salt and pepper king crab or the lobster mountain, whatever your idea is. And you might remember this from the video last year.
Yeah.
This is a place with an enormous mound of lobster. You can order lobster mountain. It literally looks like it's 4 feet high. But the thing that commends Toronto, based on these stories that Juliet and I have been reading, incredible diversity in terms of sort of, I'll call micro cuisines. There a lot of folks who have been displaced by the civil war in Syria have relocated over the last decade in Toronto. And there's a Syrian food scene in Toronto. I'm into that. I want to try that. I want to see what that's all about. And I think, like, sort of the human aspect of it
from a
as well.
diversity standpoint, it seems like it has the most to offer, but maybe of all the cities we're going to list in this podcast.
Well, there's one
every
city that rivals
possibility.
it, but it definitely has that sort of international vibe that covers so much different territory, Arabic, Indian, the Syrian thing, huge Asian thing, great sushi there. And we haven't touched any of the sort of things you would expect as native Canadians. So shout out Toronto. I think you have it in exactly the right spot.
And then on top of it, let's just say Jalen, who made a career champagning and campaigning once upon a time. I spent a lot of time with Jalen.
Yeah.
I asked him a lot of questions, especially after he's had drinks, about best NBA cities, best place to go, best place to party, best place for women, all that stuff. He revered Toronto for all the reasons you might think a single rich basketball player, Jalen Rose, when he played there, probably would have revered it. I'll leave it at that.
Well, let's leave it at that.
Number 3, San Francisco. Now, I think that the Chinese food scene in San Francisco is a little overrated, but most options for out of, I think, all the big cities, most ways to go with food. But one of the things I like about it is you also have the pockets outside. Like you have Berkeley and you have Oakland and you have you can get adventurous, almost like when you're in Texas and you're in Dallas and be like, oh, let's drive 45 minutes to that barbecue place. San Francisco has a lot of that. I've been there a lot, so I almost feel like I take it for granted, but just an incredible amount of things to do and eat in San Francisco. So it has to be third.
That's a city that has a genuine shot at hosting an NBA Finals game.
Yeah, it sure does.
Now that we have confirmation that you are going to every Finals game this year, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be inviting myself out. I think it's been a decade, perhaps longer than a decade, since I was last in San Francisco and did some eating. It's always had a reputation as being like ingredient obsessed and hyper seasonal. Really taking that sort of farm to table concept and elevating it. And another place with a huge diversity, you just touched on it, of options. And it's a place where it's a no BS city in terms of food, which is to say, if you aren't producing top notch, highly well executed meals and whatever the cuisine is that you've chosen. You're GTFO. San Francisco is the GTFO. That's exactly right.
You lose your restaurant. We're putting another one in there tomorrow. Bye.
That's right. I mean, I'm psyched. This one of our guests on House of Carbs, Kenji Lopez Alt, just opened a German Austrian style beer hall featuring Wurst, the bratwurst, the sausages, and all of it. 10 minutes from the airport. That would be my first stop. I'm getting into the airport. I'm getting into the Uber, and we're going straight to Wurst Hall. We're going straight to Wurst Hall.
I think a great argument for this podcast would have been LA versus San Francisco, and I would have advocated for LA. Unfortunately, LA has 2 basketball teams, and neither of them made the playoffs. Sorry. The Lakers.
There's nothing to talk about.
We talk about trust the process with the Sixers. The Lakers process has lasted just as long, and they still can't make the playoffs. And then the Clippers had this moment there where they had 2 of the best, 7 guys in the league. And now they have nobody left and they can't even make the playoffs. And they're pointing to stuff like, we have the 12th and 13th pick in the draft and Williams on a good deal. It's like, congratulations. You're not going to be in the playoffs for a while.
The Clippers clipped. That's what happened. The Clippers clipped. They do what they do.
2 versus 1 is The Bird versus Magic, The Wire versus The Sopranos, the Biggie versus Tupac, the Joe House's belly versus David Chang's belly. It's on par with all of those great arguments. Houston or New Orleans? Houston does not get enough credit, A, for being a great food city, B, for the unbelievable barbecue scene. Unbelievable. To the point that Daryl Morey was telling me for years and years that they always had an advantage with free agents, partly because of the size of the house you'd be able to get and the food, and maybe a couple other things too. But the food, and I was like, the food really, they love the food. But the NBA players love the food, and with reason. It's really good. The barbecue options are out of control, and Houston is gigantic. It is this sprawling, massive city, and there's just food everywhere. And if they make the finals and they host games 1, 2, 6, and 7, conceivably, it probably won't get that far. But I'm really excited to just deep dive. Let's go, Houston. Make the finals. I want to try out some of your restaurants.
So on the one hand, it's absolutely great. It shouldn't come as a surprise that New Orleans and Houston, where they sit geographically, they're very close to each other. There's always been a rivalry between the two, although Houston did take on a bunch of New Orleans residents after Katrina. So I think, some of that
interesting
rivalry has been solved. But the two places are known for the diversity of their cuisine. And Houston, you mentioned it, folks have been saying for a few years now, including our pal David Chang, whose Instagram today shows a giant pot filled with crawfish, and they look to be beautifully spiced. You mentioned barbecue. The Houston food scene features this thing. We had a couple chefs on after Harvey, Chris Shepard and Justin Yu, talking about Viet Cajun.
Oh.
Now, in the first place, Houston is supposed to be one of the great places, not other than Vietnam, to have Vietnamese food. Chang says it's the best Vietnamese food he's had anywhere.
Yeah, who knew?
Yeah, who knew? So that's one thing, but they have done this mashup over, and I think it has a long history, a long tradition in Houston of taking that Vietnamese style of cooking and merging it with that New Orleans sort of crawfish focused Creole kind of vibe, and produce this Viet Cajun thing. And it has a season. It starts in February and goes through June. And they have these, and I think an episode of Ugly Delicious. I mean, I know we're pimping out Dave Chang a buttload here, but I think his next Ugly Delicious episode is on the Houston food scene, and in particular, these crawfish.
I don't mind pimping him because I'm going to his restaurant for an 8th time this weekend, and every time I walk in, everybody shakes my hand and they give me a table and they name the fries after me. So I'll pimp him as much as I want. And I don't care what the people of OKC and Cleveland think yet again. I don't care what anyone in either city thinks about that. I think it's funny about the stereotypes of cities and food. Like I mentioned the Boston clam chowder thing a little earlier. Houston, I've always thought great barbecue in Houston. It's actually greater than just great barbecue. But then on top of it, as you said, there's a diversity in the underbelly of it that I just don't even think people realize or appreciate. And I'll tell you, I would love to exploit that. But with that said, it still doesn't top the number one on this list. The number one on any list, really. A city that I do not allow myself to go anymore because it has every vice that I have basically in life. And the last time I was there, it took me 3.5 weeks to recover. New Orleans. New Orleans food. The problem with New Orleans food is it's so rich and it's so good and it's so heavy and it's so decadent that you just get in the rhythm of eating it. And after like day 3, you kind of become an addict. It's almost hard to go back to normal food. Like it's like, oh yeah, we finished dinner. I think I'll have a bread pudding with bourbon sauce on it. Like you don't even think about it after a while. You don't appreciate it. You just become, you just kind of lose your mind. And the food's amazing. There's a bunch of different ways to go, but it's also distinct. It really always feels like New Orleans. And on top of everything else, you know how much I love gumbo. We talked about it last week. I love gumbo. I just get excited when gumbo is the special, and you throw in the fish and everything. And we didn't even talk about the beignets, which I'm not allowed to eat anymore, but New Orleans is the number one. I don't see how. I think it's an unassailable choice. What do you think, House?
I have not eaten in Houston, so I want to give Houston a fair shake.
Okay.
I have eaten in New Orleans several times.
Yeah.
And the problem I have with New Orleans is...
And his cousin Sal almost threw up on you in New Orleans. I mean, that's Cena House Eats 3.
You mentioned that you may not be allowed back in New Orleans for health reasons. I think I'm literally banned from New Orleans. I know I'm banned from the Acme Oyster House after the shape that cousin Sal in particular left that place.
Just horrible.
We did leave a big tip though. We left them a great big tip.
We also left our dignity.
Well, the problem is the list of classics in New Orleans. It's like 40 deep. So each time you go, you feel like you have to go eat at 4 or 5 places just to sort of make sure that you're keeping up, that you're exploring the city in a way that's respectful of what it's all about. And you can't do that in a lightweight way. Because the only proper way to enjoy those New Orleans classics is to eat the food the way that the chef intended it, the way that tradition intends for you to enjoy it.
There's no sauce on the side bullshit.
Exactly.
There's no, can I get that, but can you lettuce wrap that? Like, just don't go to New Orleans then. It's insulting. You know me. I'll go gluten-free with stuff. I'll get a little, I embarrassingly direct with some of my orders. I would never do that in New Orleans.
Yeah,
you're in New Orleans. You're there, man. You're playing. You're playing the game.
You're having po' boys 5 different ways.
You're having a beignet. You're just having one.
Yeah, you're having jambalaya. You're having the gumbo.
Oh, jambalaya! I forgot about jambalaya. Oh, I love jambalaya.
Right. There's no forgetting it.
Jambalaya
right?
is so good.
Yeah. Well, you're having oysters Rockefeller. You're having, bananas Foster. It's at the end of every meal.
I'm glad you brought that up. I would say the dessert scene in New Orleans trumps everybody else.
It's the first place that I ever had to bake the Alaska where he put the thing on fire, which was a glorious
they put their desserts on fire in New Orleans. They make big ass souffles. They make just bread pudding that's actually really good bread pudding. Bread pudding is like the veal chop. It can go wrong 90% of the time, but the 10% when it goes right is magnificent. They're just ready for everything. They have soups. It's one of those I remember the last time I went, between the meals we had, all the casino nights with Jacoby, and into the wee hours, the cigarettes. I really felt like I was going to die on the way home. And Jacoby, I actually thought was going to die. I was like really thinking about what happens if his eyeballs roll in the back of his head and he's just, that's it. What do we do? Do they land the plane? Do we ride it out? It's not a place you can be for more than 3 days.
Well, that's right. And fortunately for this year's NBA playoffs, it's a place that we don't have to be for any days.
Well,
there's no days we have to be
or
there.
We never thought they were going to make the playoffs. Maybe Anthony Davis just takes no prisoners, and all of a sudden we're eating jambalaya in 7 weeks. I'm not ruling it out.
Never say never. You're absolutely right about that.
Because they're going to be a 7 seed or an 8 seed, but if they play Golden State without Curry, I mean, I don't think they can win even a first round series, but what Davis did these last 3 months, I thought was extraordinary. He averaged, since the All-Star break, he averaged a 30 and 12. Yeah, I mean, those are like Shaq numbers. And on top of it, like 3.5 blocks a game and 5 or 6 holy shit plays a game, and he's completely unstoppable. So
it was an all-timer performance.
It really was.
He put together a 50-game season that would make him the MVP if you could stretch it out across 80 games in any season. His 50-game stretch was as good as anything you can muster amongst anybody that's won the MVP of the last decade.
Because he never wanted to play center, and Boogie goes out, and he basically has to log a huge chunk of time at center. And the reality is, with the way basketball is played in 2018, he's the best possible version of a 5 that we're going to have in the league. And if you're going all time, he's in the discussion for, I would say, like 1986 McHale, 2001, 2002 Duncan, like guys who weren't really centers but moved like sleek forwards and just gave you all kinds of options and could shoot from the outside a little bit. And he's just the guy you would want out of all the guys we have right now. And he embraced it. And it's just a bizarre story that somehow cost us lots of money that I don't want to talk about.
Well, fortunately, New Orleans is not getting any more of our money because they're not going to make it to the NBA Finals. So of the likely matchups, it seems like, as we sit here today on April the 10th, the finals are going to feature Golden State or Houston in the West, it seems like. So 2 outstanding eating towns, 2 of our top 5. And then in the East, I mean, what are we doing? What are we talking about?
Well, Philly would be the ideal.
Philly ahead of Toronto. Toronto's in our top 5.
I'm just saying, for the most fun series that has the most storylines and just is the weirdest and most, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. I think from an eating standpoint, Houston versus Toronto is kind of the holy grail, and one of those things where you just tell the tailor to let out 5 pounds in your slacks before you even go. Just do it preemptively.
I'm rooting for it. I'm going to gamble on it just to have a taste, to have that rooting interest.
It's
Although
definitely
if I gamble on it, it won't happen. So maybe I should leave it alone.
Yeah, about 10 days in, maybe you unbuckle your pants at the table as you're still eating, but you had a few too many drinks and you stood up and your pants fell down. It's one of those series.
Wouldn't be the first time. Yeah. Would not be the first time.
It's up my pants are around my ankles series.
On that note.
But yeah, so you could say Houston number 1, New Orleans number 1. I don't really care what the order is. I just want to make sure that OKC and Cleveland are 15 and 16 in some order. We might end up in Cleveland and we might take shit, but I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's not an insult, Cleveland. Like, you don't have a good food scene. You just don't.
No, maybe they do. Maybe they do. We've thrown down the gauntlet. If there's good food in Cleveland that we haven't detected, that hasn't been brought up over our travels,
tell
let's
House.
hear it.
House has an Instagram. He's got a House of Carbs Instagram. You can send him pictures of awesome dishes from Cleveland. You can tweet at him.
Belly source that shit.
Yeah, tell him. If we're wrong, we're not being mean about it. We just don't know any better. I just know from my experiences eating in OKC and Cleveland that the options were scarce. I might have
we're
had
hungry about
terrible
it. We're not
information.
angry, we're hungry.
Yeah, we're not angry. We're hungry. So send us
That's
some
it.
recommendations. And we should mention, because I think I bumped Danny Chow because I went too long. But next week, Danny Chow should come in and review our list and give us his take on a couple of these, right? That should be the sequel. Almost
I
like
can't wait.
the critic
Yeah,
for
Danny is our man on the ground. He's touring these cities and eating in them. He's most recently been to Portland and New Orleans in the last 6 months. So we're going to get some great names and some great tastes out of Danny's mouth. And if you want a preview before we get to Danny next week, get on his Instagram. You have to follow him on the Instagram, Danny King Chow, at Danny King Chow on Instagram. Get on the man's Instagram and get a preview of what we're going to be talking about, because it's mother effing delicious.
And again, if you took offense to any of the rankings, if you live in one of these cities and you're offended by how we rank them or our lack of information, instead of complaining about it, instead of calling us angry words and bitching about it and being shitty, help us, educate us, send us
Belly source.
do some belly sourcing and send us some Instagrams and change our minds. Turn this into a positive. It's not a negative, it's a positive. My impression of OKC is I've been there a couple times, and 2 of the best 5 restaurants in the entire city were named after athletes. I don't know. That's a red flag in my mind. But if we're wrong, prove it to us. Tell us why we're wrong.
I anticipate some outstanding belly source and
Great.
Bill Simmons.
Bring it on.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on, House. This was fun.
Thanks for coming on the House of Carbs, buddy.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right, Ringer NBA show homies. There we go. Your mishmash Ringer NBA and House of Carbs show in the books. Friends, be sure to check out theringer.com/shop, where you can get outstanding Ringer hats, Ringer hoodies, Ringer tees. Supplies are limited, so jump on theringer.com/shop and see what's in there. I, my own self, was down in Augusta, Georgia last week, and I was rocking some very solid Ringer hats. We had the green with the mesh, the black mesh. We had a solid green twill. A lot of good options in there. Some of your favorite slogans and logos that have emanated from the Ringer universe. Theringer.com/shop. Get in there and drop some coin.